My name is Dennis Shaw, and I'm honored to serve as the worship associate for this service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Charlotte County, also known as UUFCC. You are welcome here, no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, no matter what your background. You are welcome here to join us as we proclaim worth in our spiritual journeys. You are welcome here to join us as we share songs that uplift our very beings. You are welcome to join us in community as we learn, live, and love together. As you heard, we start our service each week by singing an invitation to gather together, even as we're scattered in many different places. And whether our sacred space be virtual or live, we are glad that you've decided to spend time with us. I would like to express my gratitude for our technology support this morning. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Corey. Also, I want to thank Bobby and the Building and Grounds Committee that make this place what it is. We're also grateful for Jim B., our music director, and Linda, the members of the UUFCC choir, for this morning's recorded music, and the membership team that serves as greeters. This service is being broadcast via YouTube. Consequently, to protect folks' privacy, it's our practice to use, usually, first names only. The YouTube recording will also be available on the UUFCC YouTube channel after the service. I'd also like to remind you of a couple simple procedures that will help our service and broadcast run smoothly. First, please silence your phones. For those with us virtually, you may wish to have a chalice or candle available for our chalice lighting ritual. For those in the sanctuary, we are still asking that everyone wear masks inside. When the service is over, please exit through the front door, but for those who need a smooth surface to exit the building, feel free to use the lobby doors. We will gather on the patio for our social time, but if unmasked, please remember to practice social distancing. Coffee and snacks will be served by our weekly volunteers, and you can sign up to be a volunteer on the bulletin board in the fellowship hall. If you are new here, please stand or raise your hand so that we can welcome you. Okay. If you're viewing this service on YouTube and are unfamiliar with this fellowship but would like to learn more, email our administrator, Mary Jane, at office@uufcc.org or visit our website at uufcc.org. And when you are, and wherever you are, we're glad you've chosen to spend your time with us. And now we will open the sacred space by turning our attention to the chalice. I have chosen an adaptation of Howard Thurman's words found in Lifting Our Voices, Readings in the Living Tradition, for our chalice lighting. I confess my own inner confusion as I look out upon the world. There is food for all, but many are hungry. There are clothes enough for all, yet many are in rags. There is room enough for all, so many are crowded. There are none who want war, but preparations for conflict abound. May the light burn in me, that I may from this moment on take effective steps within my own powers to live up to the light and courageously to pay for the kind of world I so desperately desire. Thank you, Patrick, for lighting the chalice. And now let us recite our affirmation. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its law. This is our aspiration, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to help one another. Our prelude this morning is Pass It On, arranged by Mark Hayes. Our opening words are by Henry David Thoreau. Why should we live in such a hurry and waste of life? We are determined to be starved before we are hungry. I wish to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life. I wish to learn what life has to teach, and not when I come to die discover that I have not lived. I do not wish to live what is not life. Living is so dear. Nor do I wish to practice resignation, unless it's quite necessary. I wish to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life. I want to cut a broad swath, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms. If it proves to be mean, then to get the whole and genuine meanness of it and publish its meanness to the world. Or, if it's sublime, to know it by experience and to be able to give a true account of it. And now we'll have a recorded hymn, Fire of Commitment.
Into
We have a long tradition at UUFCC of sharing our joys and sorrows and life milestones by entering them into the Book of Life. These messages can be written in the red book at the back of the sanctuary. And as Jackie brings it forward, I will read any entries. Those at home are welcome to email your entries to bookoflife@uufcc.org. Messages should be sent no later than Saturday prior to the service. All entries will be read by the worship associate during the Sunday morning service. After that, email messages will be entered into the actual red book. After I've completed reading, we will enter into a moment of silence, followed by our hymn, Spirit of Life. Alan Lane writes, my uncle and dad have been in hospitals this week. They're different hospitals on the Florida southeast coast. Please keep these gentlemen in your thoughts and prayers. As most of you know, I have been renting for the past year. But I've had a big commotion with my landlord, or as I like to call him, Slum Master. I have put down a down payment on a new tiny house. Wish me luck as I build it out. And this is from Corey. And I would like to thank Mark Lang, son of our late member Marilyn Reeve, for this morning's beautiful flower arrangement. And I want to especially express my gratitude to the Hospitality Committee for the beautiful reception that they set up following Marilyn's service. May we hold these and our unspoken joys and sorrows in our hearts. May we also hold one another in love and tenderness so that this fellowship may be a source of strength and comfort, courage and hope in the days and weeks ahead. And now we will have a time of silence, followed by Spirit of Life. I'm very pleased to welcome the Reverend Beth Miller to our service this morning. In 2012, after 22 years in parish and institutional ministry, the Reverend Beth Miller semi-retired and became a snowbird, living 9 months a year in Sebastian, Florida. But retirement didn't take, and soon she became part-time consulting minister, serving Friendship Fellowship in Pinda, and doing guest preaching and facilitation at area churches. Since then, she has served short-term fill-in ministries in Arlington, Virginia, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and in September of 2019, Beth joined the UU Church of Sarasota, Florida, as half-time contract associate minister, from which she retired April 1st this year. Beth previously served as sole or senior minister for 3 congregations over 16 years, directed the Department of Ministry and Professional Leadership at UUA for 5 years, and worked as an organizational development consultant for Mass Bay and Clara Barton districts of the UUA for 1 year. Beth brings a great deal of experience to all aspects of ministry and looks forward to offering occasional ministerial services where needed. The title of her sermon is A Matter of Principles. Reverend Miller.
All right, let me get organized here. Hello. It's nice to see you all, to meet you. I've been in your building a time or two before the pandemic. I came up here to ministers' cluster meetings 2 or 3 times, so I'm a little familiar with the plant, but I've not met any of you. So I'm glad to do that. Let's see here. Let me get organized here. So the sermon today is a matter of principles, and I'm going to talk about the principles in general ways. And I want to begin by reading the principles, and I see you have them right here, so you're probably quite familiar with them, but we'll go through them real quickly again. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. And an 8th principle is under consideration. It says, journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. Somebody asked it, Jim asked me if we were going to get into that, and no, I'm not getting into any of that. We're talking about the principles in a larger context, so I'll leave it to you guys to discuss all of those details. And you know, there's a commission working on overview of the whole statement right now, and after General Assembly, I imagine you'll get study materials, not just about the proposed 8th principle, but about their possible revisions to all of them and whatnot. So but that's not where we're going today. Like me, I'm assuming that many of you had more traditional religious upbringings. When I was growing up in Sunday school in the Methodist Church, we were taught the basic rules. We learned the golden rule, do unto others as you would have others do unto you, and the 10 Commandments. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make idols. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Honor your father and your mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbors. You shall not covet. We also learned about the Bible stories in Sunday school, and in the worship service we learned the hymns, which I loved, and to recite the Apostles' Creed, the beliefs of the Christian faith. I learned in Sunday school what it meant to be a Christian, at least a mainline Methodist Christian child in the 1950s and 60s. I was taught the beliefs and the rules to follow to practice my religion. But except for because the Bible says so, I didn't learn why we had any of those rules. What were the fundamental principles behind the rules? We Unitarian Universalists don't have a creed, and we don't have specific rules, although the Golden Rule and the Ten Commandments are, for the most part, still pretty good advice. Instead, we teach our children, and our adults as well, about covenants and principles. Here's how one Unitarian Universalist religious educator explains the rules and covenants, the idea of rules and covenants to kids. This is from a blog called Good Minute Blog, and she's talking about a specific session she had in religious education class in her UU church. We posted a big sheet of paper on the board and in 2 columns wrote down covenants and rules. After a bit of discussion, I was delighted to find that even these 8 and 9-year-olds could grasp the difference. A covenant is a promise, a commitment to a principle, a basic action. A rule is something we do or follow as a result of wanting to fulfill the covenant. So, for example, one of the children said, "Don't fight." That's an excellent rule, but why? Why is it important not to fight? So that someone doesn't get their face knocked out, said one boy. Yes, I said, but why is that important? It took some patient attempts at discussion, but after a time, they began to pick up on the idea. Our covenant is to respect each other, and so the rule, "Don't fight," helps us to fulfill it. We also have a covenant to be kind, let everyone be heard, and that each person is important. Many times I think we don't give children credit enough for being able to grasp the rationale behind the rules. It's easier to give rules, to say, just do it this way because I said so. How many of you heard that as a kid? Because I said so, right? She goes on, it is harder and more time-consuming to help kids grasp the rationale, the principle, the basis for the rule. When we respect children's capability to be internally motivated by a principle rather than externally motivated by a rule, we really achieve lasting growth. What a gratifying thing it is to see a child grasp a principle, to really take it inside themselves. That's the end of the passage. Our principles are neither rules nor statements of belief, but guides to help us form our own beliefs and make our own rules for living lives of integrity. Some say that means UUs can believe anything they want or anything that pleases them. I'm going to say more about that a little later, but I want you to know, not just superficially, but very deeply, that Unitarian Universalism is much more complicated than that. Our UU principles are the covenant our congregations share with the rest of the congregations of our denomination, and they are the covenant our congregations share with each other within the congregations to ground and to guide us. And that religious education teacher said it so well. A covenant is a promise, a commitment to a principle, a basis for action. A rule is something we do or follow as a result of wanting to fulfill the covenant. Like the children in our reading, we are challenged to take our principles seriously. not to memorize them like a creed, but to grasp them ever more deeply so that they internally motivate us to articulate our own rules for behaving ethically. That's how they're approached in Unitarian Universalist religious education classes with children and youth, and that's how we approach them as adults as well. As a Unitarian Universalist congregation, you strive for a common purpose through worship, through adult programs and small groups, and in how you care for one another, and even in the ways you organize and conduct yourselves as you do the church's work, the business of the church, of being a congregation. You have lots of ways of articulating this common purpose. Like my Methodist Sunday school, we have stories and songs, readings and prayers that help us articulate or understand or identify the purpose of our faith. Our purpose, in my mind, boils down to two closely related commitments. One commitment for how we are internally together within the congregation we're a part of, and the other for how we engage with others in the larger community beyond our congregation. So for me, the internal purpose of a Unitarian Universalist congregation is to help each of us bring ever more into alignment what we say our values are and how we actually live our lives. To bring those ever more into alignment. That's what spiritual growth is about. And externally, how we relate to the wider community outside the congregation, our purpose is to increase the sum total of love and justice in the world. Said more simply, the purpose of Unitarian Universalist congregations is to grow our own souls and to help build a better world. To grow our own souls and help build a better world. That's so very easy to say. It just sort of rolls off the tongue. And it's very difficult to do. It's not so easy to live, right? I've been an active UU for 48 years and a minister for 32 years, and I still struggle with living the values I profess and being all about love and justice in the world. As we've become increasingly polarized as a nation, I find it ever more difficult to stay grounded in those ideals, to maintain that sense of love and justice and acceptance and the things that our principles point us to. That becomes ever more challenging in these days, and I have to keep stretching how I understand them in order to stay grounded in them. And sometimes I don't do a very good job. Spiritual growth is a lifelong process, though, and I need a religious community to help me stay grounded in my values and open to newer information and deeper insights. Our Unitarian Universalist principles provide that framework. The principles are our covenant. They are statements of aspiration, not rules, not beliefs, but aspirations. Most religions offer rules and beliefs as their framework. Unitarian Universalism rejects that notion, inviting us instead to form our own beliefs and internalize our own rules to live by. That can be difficult to understand, and it's even more difficult to explain to others how this can be a religion with no specific rules or deeply held beliefs. What is the organizing principle? What do we stand for? What does it really mean to be a Unitarian Universalist? These are the perennial questions and concerns Unitarian Universalists have grappled with from generation to generation throughout our history. How does a faith tradition that vehemently rejects having a creed, a test of faith, understand itself and present itself to the world? How does my religion challenge me, help me grow spiritually, encourage me to be and become my best self? Does it save me from my own baser instincts of greed and selfishness? Does my religion transform me? Unitarianism, 400 years of freedom, reason, and tolerance, was a slogan the American Unitarian Association adopted in 1946. That set them up for that oft-repeated statement that Unitarians can believe anything they want or anything that pleases them. And there is a grain of truth there, but it isn't very helpful either for our own faith development or for reaching out to others. Here's why, in the words of the Reverend William Hammond from a sermon he gave in 1979 entitled, "Freedom of Belief is Not Sufficient." I had joined the Unitarian Church of Rockville, Maryland in 1974, and like many new UUs, I was quick to say that we could believe anything we wanted. That was so exciting to me that I didn't have a specific creed or set of dogma I had to embrace. So that kind of rolled off my tongue pretty easily. But Hammond's sermon completely changed my thinking on this. I'm going to read part of that sermon to you. What he said was, "Let's face it, there's some truth in that anything we please bit. In UU circles, nobody is going to forbid you from believing any wise or foolish thing you choose to believe. You don't have to clear any hurdles of belief to become a member of one of our congregations. But if that were our whole story, it would have been over with us some time ago. I want to say that in my view, a substantial number of UU folks who reject the idea that they are religious are actually significantly religious if we proceed from an adequate understanding of that term. If they will look in a dictionary at the Latin root of the word religious, they will find it is re, and ligare, meaning literally to bind again. To become religious is to bind oneself again in the sense of to commit oneself again, abandoning a condition of being uncommitted. I've long been guided by a definition which says to be religious is to strive with constancy and devotion to live in keeping with one's understanding about the nature of life, the world, and the self. I'm going to repeat that last phrase. To be religious is to strive with constancy and devotion to live in keeping with one's understanding about the nature of life, the world, and the self. That's the end of Hammond's words. The preamble to the principles in our statement of principles and purposes says that our congregations covenant to affirm and promote. This is what binds us together. We covenant to affirm and promote. Affirming and promoting is not the same as following rules. To affirm means to declare one's support for, to uphold or defend. To declare one's support for, to uphold or defend. To promote means to further the progress of something, to support or actively encourage. To further the progress of something, to support or actively encourage. We covenant to relate to our principles in this manner, in order to strive with constancy and devotion. So how do we do that? What would it mean to really covenant to affirm and promote these 7 principles? Another Unitarian Universalist minister and friend, the Reverend Meg Barnhouse, wrote in a blog she did a little while ago something about this. She writes, "My experience of the principles is they are deeply demanding. The first one asks me to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, which means that I can no longer subscribe to the cheerful Calvinist doctrine of the total depravity of human nature." She's got quite a fun edge to her. She goes on, "It sounds grim, but really, if you are in fact starting with a total depravity nature, a totally depraved nature, the opportunity for self-congratulations abounds. Hey, I didn't knock over a 7-Eleven this afternoon, even though money's pretty tight. I'm doing well. Now I have to struggle with the worth and dignity of people who do unspeakably awful things, whereas the doctrine of total depravity made that a no-brainer. I'm supposed to value the democratic process, hearing the voices of everyone equally, allowing everyone to have a say. The UU principles are demanding enough to make me whine, she says. There's more, but you get the drift. Later, she makes a suggestion to help us think more deeply about how we might covenant to affirm and promote our principles. She writes, let's stick something onto the end of every principle that will stop people from smiling and nodding comfortably as they are read. How about attaching beginning in our homes and congregations? So let's think about that for just a moment. We covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, beginning in our homes and our congregation. How would our homes be different if we consistently really tried all the time to affirm and promote the worth and dignity of the people with whom we live? What about the congregation? Would things be any different? What does it really mean? How do differences and conflicts get addressed? Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, beginning in our homes and congregation. How do we balance justice with equity? Sometimes they're kind of contradictory. How do we have compassion at home, here in our congregations? The questions don't get easier as we go through the list. Acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth, beginning in our homes and congregations. What might this ask of us? In our congregations, what about when the person sitting next to you has totally different beliefs than you do and you don't necessarily agree with them? How do you affirm and promote their growth? A free and responsible search for truth and meaning, beginning in our homes and congregations. Do we spend the right portion of our life's energy, focus, and time on searching for truth and meaning at home or at church? The rights of conscience and the use of the democratic process, beginning in our homes and congregations. Do we take this seriously enough? How do we balance this principle with justice, equity, and compassion? The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, beginning in our homes and congregations. When keeping the peace at home or in our faith community, while also respecting everyone's liberty in a way that's just, seems to be so challenging, and sometimes it really does, how do we promote this on a worldwide scale? Respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part, beginning in our homes and congregation. How do we really explore what respecting the interdependent web means and make it a deeply motivating force in our actions at home and in our congregations? Tough questions, to be sure. Reverend Barnhouse, toward the end of her blog, points us to Lao Tzu, the ancient Chinese philosopher and founder of Taoism. She makes an even more challenging suggestion. She writes, Lao Tzu, quoted in the back of our hymn book, says, peace in the world begins with peace in the home, which begins with peace in the heart. If I start with my own heart, the demands of our principles get even heavier. Peace and compassion in my heart, justice too, freedom as well, affirming the worth and dignity of every person all the time, not only with my words and my behavior, but in my secret heart. Whew. Taking our principles seriously is way more complicated than just saying UUs can believe anything they want. And maybe I'm making it too complicated. Maybe we should just go back to that religious education class I told you about at the beginning. A covenant is a promise, a commitment to a principle, a basis for action. A rule is something we do or follow as a result of wanting to fulfill the covenant. If we covenant to affirm and promote our principles, we can judge the legitimacy of proposed rules, although we still have to balance competing demands. One of the children said, don't fight. That's an excellent rule, but why? Why is it important not to fight? so that someone doesn't get their face knocked out. But still, we won't always get it right. Sometimes we will fight. Sometimes we will undermine someone's dignity with our words or our deeds. We won't always act justly. Sometimes we will put our self-interest or even just our convenience ahead above the greater good. So we should also return to Reverend Hammond's claim. To be religious is to strive with constancy and devotion, to live in keeping with one's understanding about the nature of life, the world, and the self. It seems to me that striving with constancy and devotion is good enough. It certainly is challenging enough because I guarantee you we won't always succeed. We won't always be constant and consistently devoted. We are human. We err. I don't know about you, but I know I will never live our Unitarian Universalist principles perfectly. Far from it. The goal is not perfection, but to keep growing our souls, to keep getting closer and closer to alignment. There is a descant in the hymn that I thought we were going to sing, Come, Come, Wherever You Are. Is that is after the sermon? Okay. Do you do the descant? No. Okay. When you're listening to that hymn, I'll tell you there's a descant that goes, though you've broken your vows 1,000 times, come, yet again come. And it's sort of sung above the main line. Though you've broken your vows 1,000 times, come, yet again come. Religare, to be religious, is to bind oneself again. To bind oneself again. Not to seek perfection, but to strive with constancy and devotion again and again. Come, come, whoever you are, come, yet again come. Can we sing it now? That's the end of the sermon. Let's sing. You need to come. Oh, I don't know what's on the docket next. Am I not up here yet still?
Thank you very, very much. I also want to say, I knew Bill Hammond. I was in the Asheville UU Church when he was the minister there. In our tradition, congregations exist because of the generous support of members and friends. It is our privilege and our responsibility to ensure the health and future of this fellowship. To this end, your offerings to support the ministry of this fellowship, whether by pledge or donation, may be offered, should be offered. There are several ways you can give. You can drop your donation in the baskets that are going to be passed in just a moment. For those at home, you can mail checks to the office or drop them in our mailbox, or call the office to make other arrangements. We are also equipped to accept donations through the Venmo app. Payments through this app should be made to UUFCC offering. If you are with us for the first time, do not feel obligated to give. Your presence is gift enough. And now, Jim will play Nocturne, Opus 9, number 2 by Chopin. And now it's time to highlight UUFCC special events and activities in the life of our community. Please, please, please remember to always check your weekly updates. They include a calendar and links for connecting via Zoom or in person. Additionally, if you'd like to have fellowship events highlighted during the service, you can email the worship associates at bookoflife@uufcc.org. Today, I have the following announcements. The membership committee will meet tomorrow, June 6th at 10:30. Again, the ongoing Spanish for Beginners with Herb is at 4 o'clock, and that is also Monday. Betty Barriga has a class on Tuesday at 10 o'clock. And we have yoga with Jennifer on Wednesday at 10. The Caring Committee will meet this week on Wednesday at 1:30. And on Thursday, the 9th, at 10 a.m., there's a communications workshop with Reverend Kathy Schmidt. Use the universal link, and this is the second part of that workshop. I went to the first part and learned a lot. I encourage you to zoom in. Also, I've been asked to announce that the Healing Conversations group is recommending that Charlotte County residents attend Charlotte County School Board meetings. if they can. It's been pointed out to us that almost every meeting someone raises the issue of critical race theory, inappropriate learning materials, supporting the young people who speak out against policies or practices that they see as divisive. Or they need to hear our voices. The specific information on this meeting is in the daily updates and weekly updates, and please check those for the time and the place. Finally, I want to remind you that we have a box outside the front door. It's called a BOGO box, and your gifts of non-perishable foods are greatly needed, especially at this time of rising inflation. These products go to CHAPS, and it's important that we continue to do that. And now Reverend Miller will provide the words to close the service and a benediction.
So I'm just going to close with repeating some of Reverend Hammond's words, his definition. To be religious is to strive with constancy and devotion to live in keeping with one's understanding about the nature of life, the world, and the self. And with this in mind, go your ways, knowing not the answers to all things, yet seeking always the answer to one more thing than you know. May it be so. Amen. It's been a pleasure to be with you. Go now in peace, right? Go now in peace.
Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the Spirit of us surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the Spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere.